Basically, Gaydio was formed back in 2006 originally, when myself and Ian Wallace, who are currently running the company, had the idea of, well, initially we wanted to get involved with Manchester Pride, I guess, and kind of add something to the festival, and I guess kind of reflect it and make it open to an audience outside of Manchester, I suppose, because obviously thousands of people come to Manchester for the Pride Festival, but there's lots of people that can't get here. And the idea came from sort of two other similar projects, I guess. There's one down in Newquay in Cornwall, where my dad lives, when they used to do a short-term radio station for their surf festival. So that kind of gave us the idea of doing a kind of a 2-week radio station. And then in Melbourne there's a full-time station called Joy FM, which I think was the world's first full-time gay radio station. So kind of both of those ideas came together and spawned Gaydio, I guess, back in 2006. We did 2 weeks around for the first Pride Festival, and then we kind of set ourselves a bit of a challenge of doing 4 weeks, which is the maximum you can possibly do with this kind of license, in February, because lots of people said, okay, it's great that you can do a radio station around a Pride Festival, but obviously it's quite easy to do that in a way. So what about a dismal February in a rainy Manchester? And so we did 4 weeks in February 2007, and that was a really successful broadcast. And building on the success of that, we did a further 2 broadcasts, month-long broadcasts, and then applied for a full-time radio licence to Ofcom. And we were successful in getting that back in 2008, which seems like quite a long time ago now. But we're currently doing all the sort of behind-the-scenes work, getting ready to launch the service full-time later this year. And it's quite a big deal, I guess, because it's the country's first full-time FM radio station for gay, lesbian, bisexual and trans people, and it makes absolute sense that, you know, it's adding to a list of other Manchester firsts, I suppose. It's not a national station. It's based in Manchester, where it was born, so it makes absolute sense for us to stay here. But yeah, the licence is for an FM broadcast in Manchester. But what we've found is that the online listening that's done around not just the country but around the world really kind of we were quite surprised by the level of that, actually. And I think because, you know, there's lots of internet radio stations out there, and, you know, you can set one up in your bedroom nowadays, but what happens is the sort of credibility of the FM radio licence really kind of brings kudos, I guess, to the web listening. And so we found, you know, thousands of people listening from across the country and indeed across the world to kind of get a flavour, I guess, of gay Manchester and what's happening in the city. So it's a kind of a tricky situation that we're in now at the moment, knowing that, you know, we've got this FM radio licence in Manchester, and that's absolutely what we're about, but we know that there's people across the world wanting to kind of listen to that. So it's how Manchester are we, and the sort of the angle that we're taking is that we're broadcasting gay Manchester to the world, I guess. It's interesting because, say, gay Manchester to a lot of people, and obviously they think of Canal Street and the gay village, and that was, I guess, made popular through kind of the kind of queer as folk generation, I suppose. And it's interesting when you look back at that now, because when that programme was made, that's not what Manchester was like necessarily. It was quite aspirational in a way, and reflected a very vibrant scene in Manchester. And I'm not saying that wasn't the case entirely, but I think that programme in itself was quite responsible for some of that vibrancy that the city's known for in terms of its LGBT population. But now it's absolutely the case that it's got a thriving gay scene. And I think any visitor to Manchester, I mean, when I first came, I think the first time I visited Manchester was probably for I think it was the first time that Manchester Pride called itself Pride as opposed to Mardi Gras or anything like that, and it was Euro Pride, which must have been back in 2003, I think, or something like that. And I remember I came here and I thought, wow, there's something going on in this city, there's a buzz about it, and it's so welcoming of LGBT people. And so for us, making a radio station here, it's the absolute perfect home for it, because it's so vibrant, it's so lively, and we're really looking forward to the opportunity of kind of capturing that vibrancy and putting it into a radio station. In terms of what it's going to offer to visitors, it's fantastic. The great thing about radio is that obviously you can kind of get instant feedback from your audience, and you've got this kind of connection with the audience that you don't really get from other forms such as TV or something like that. And you can read, the presenter on air can read an email that a listener 2,000 miles away sends in and read it out on the air like that. So it's great. You know, a good example is when we were doing the Pride Festival, we got emails from people in, you know, all over the world saying that it was fantastic. They could kind of be brought home in a way. Some people say expats that had gone elsewhere and now sort of say, oh, well, I miss Manchester, but what the radio is able to do is kind of remind me a little bit of that and kind of capture the flavour of Manchester Pride and the like. And it's not just about Pride, obviously. This is going 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. It's quite a big ask, I suppose. And the thing that we say is that it's not gay subject necessarily all the time. It's just about a familiar perspective to LGBT people, and I use that word gay just to kind of encompass all of that, I suppose. It's about a familiar perspective. It's a radio station that knows where you're coming from, and you know, it's just, I guess, a gay slant on the world, I suppose. So the kind of subject material is really diverse, from, you know, LGBT news stories that affect, you know, on the national news agenda, right down to things like local scene listings and that sort of thing. But we've always been quite ambitious, well, very ambitious, and I suppose quite cocky in a kind of traditionally Mancunian way, in that we have aimed high and really set the bar higher each time we've done it. From, you know, the first time we decided to do a broadcast outside of Manchester was to cover the Mr Gay UK competition that was on in Blackpool. So then the next time we sort of said, well, okay, we've gone outside of Manchester now, let's go outside of the country. So then we did a weekend of broadcasts from Gran Canaria, and that sort of things, we're going to develop on that. And we're really looking forward to getting our teeth into some big projects. Long term, who knows, you know, we're really excited about the attention that Gaydio is getting in terms of across the country and across the world online. I'm not sure if Gaydio is going to spawn little Gaydio, offspring elsewhere across the country. At the moment, we're definitely focused on Manchester, but we're really excited about just getting our teeth into it, I guess. I think when people come to Manchester, obviously the first thing you're going to do is, if you're an LGBT visitor, is probably hit Canal Street, and absolutely, you know, you should do that. I'm not saying that you shouldn't, but that's not what Gay Manchester is. It's not solely what Gay Manchester is about. There's so much more to that. I mean, down to things like the Queer Up North arts festival that goes on across the city, things like that. Those sort of calendar events are, I think, what really sets Manchester apart. But there's things to be doing all year round, and also the neglected suburbs, perhaps, a little bit. I mean, I've just moved not so long back to Chorlton myself. I lived in Salford originally, and I'm just starting to kind of find a whole new scene over there, I suppose. So yeah, that's the one thing I'd say. Don't necessarily just set your sights on the city. Look a bit wider, perhaps, as well.